This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is the man with a plan. That's what I call him, Dr. Claud Anderson. He's the only person I know that has a plan specifically for black folks. If you've got a friend you know who's interested or you think it would learn something, tell them to get on the radio and listen here on 1450 in the D.C. area or at www.woldcnews.com, anywhere in the world to listen to Dr. Anderson. Before the break, Doc, you were telling us about, I guess I posed the question, why don't we hold our black elected officials' feet to the fire? And you were responding, you were telling us why.
Well, yeah, as I said, I did a study, and I did a comparative analysis of the connection between blacks getting benefits in the country and the number of black elected officials and the discomfort levels in black communities across America back in the 1960s. That means that at that time we had 103 black elected officials in the entire United States. And I looked at the discomfort indicators like the number of blacks on food stamp, welfare, number of blacks in prisons, blacks in dysfunctional schools, the high unemployment rate for black folks, the lack of business ownership for blacks, and all these kind of things. Then I waited, Carl, faithfully waited for 30 years from 1960 to 1990. I did the same identical study to see that why in 1990 was because by 1990, the number of black elected officials in the entire United States had gone up from 103 to over 9,000. That means there was a 9,000% increase in the number of black elected officials in the United States. It occurred between 1960 and 1990. And I said, good God, if we've gone from 103 or 100 blacks elected officials to over 9,000, then we must be walking on gold and sleeping on diamonds. And I looked at the discomfort indicators for black folk. I expected a massive appreciation and an uplift, an uptick in the quality of life for black folk in America. But I looked at it, and guess what? Black folk didn't advance by putting 9,000 blacks into public office. Things didn't improve. Things got worse. And I said, how in the world can you have a 9,000% increase in black elected officials and conditions in black America get worse? And then after I did a further analysis, I found out because there is no direct connection between putting a black person in a public office and blacks getting benefits. Because, you see, black people are the only group in this country that never demands anything from a public candidate for an office. They never demand anything. They vote based on personalities and why they feel about the person. They never think about what benefits. They violate the basic definition of politics. I told you a few seconds ago that politics is a process that decides who gets what benefits out of life. Politics decides whether you get your garbage collected, whether your kids will be able to go to school, whether or not you have the right to vote, or whether or not you even get and have food in your neighborhood, or whether or not you ever have a business. And that's politics. Politics decide that. And politics didn't come into existence as we presently know it until around 1529. It came into existence about 20 years after the birth of capitalism and 30 years after supposedly Columbus discovered America. And all those things are connected and linked, and I'll explain them to you later on when you want to know about it.
Okay, and so how do we identify which ones? You just basically said that there aren't any that are basically doing anything for us, but is that blanket all black elected officials? You mentioned we got a bunch of them, but are they all really just garbage, or any of them? How can we identify the ones that are working for us?
Well, it's easy. Just go look at the records. Just go to any black elected officials and say, write down a piece of paper for me, what you have specifically done to follow the basic principles of politics. Politics means one hand washes the other. You take care of me, I take care of you. I vote for you, you support me. And you go ask them, say, since black folk put you in office and you represent a black district, tell them to write down a piece of paper. Tell me exactly what you have done specifically and solely for those people that put you in office. See, all these public officials swear an oath. They promise to honor and serve. It's a vow and protect those people who voted them into a public office. We live in a nation of representative government, which means you're supposed to represent the people who vote you into office. That's about, you can't be any clearer than that. We live in a nation of representative government. You're supposed to represent those people who put you in office. Now, if I were to go down to Mississippi now and follow most of the whites coming from Mississippi, all those elected officials, the congressmen and the senators for all the years, for 300 years, coming from Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, coming to Washington, D.C., they did not come here to represent all the people. They came here to represent their state and their people. And if I could go out west right now, most of these conservatives coming in from California, not from California, but from the Midwest, everything from Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Colorado, and ask them, they come here to represent their constituents who they feel is basically whites. And you ask black folk, go ask the black officials, what have you done to produce services and goods and wealth and income for the people who voted you in office? And you watch what they write down on a piece of paper. What they would typically write down is some very broad, ambiguous, generic action that they took. But what they did for the world or what they did for the country, they never write down anything specific they've done for their people. But you go find any other group. Go watch the Asians, any elected Asian. Go watch Hispanics, and what they'll write down. They said, I got elected to a public office. I'm in Congress, and I'm a member of the National Hispanic Caucus in Congressional Caucus in Washington, D.C. And what I brought this, I voted for to expand the immigration laws so I can bring in more immigrants into the country. I voted to get immigrants, newcoming immigrants, onto welfare and Social Security benefits. I voted for them to take and convert bilingual the old Great Society programs that were put in place in the 1950s or 60s for black children. I voted to have those switched now to the bilingual education programs, or for Hispanics. I voted for this for Hispanics and that for Hispanics. Everybody does that for their own people, but you will not. And if you do, I would be so amazed, and I would take back everything I'm saying publicly. If you go find me a black elected official that can write down a piece of paper what he's done specifically and solely for black folk when he comes here, he's supposed to represent them first above all others. But in the history of this nation, I've never seen it. And I've been in politics now with presidents and governors. I ran the campaigns. I've been in the White House with part of the White House team with President Carter as an assistant secretary in rank. I now sat as a black chairman for a board of governors for economic development for eastern and southern governors. I have never seen a black elected official come to a table, take a piece of paper and say, I did this. I can go find blacks right now sitting in Congress, for instance, that have been in Congress now for 30 or 40 years, and you cannot show where they brought one penny home to the black community in an urban city.
Wow, that's deep. Before we go on, because I want to get into the Powernomics book, but Layla wants you to know, she says, please let Dr. Anderson know that I adore him, appreciate him, and respect him. And says anyone who speaks differently is completely idiotic and has walked right into the entrapment that was prescribed for Africans in this stolen land. She also goes on to say, unfortunately, there's a significant number of, quote, lazy people who do not want to, quote, stand for righteousness like these Europeans, so they lose. So she says, stay strong, Baba. I'm with you, Akwaba, which is a Ghanaian phrase, word, if you will. It means welcome. So she's responding to what you said earlier, Doc.
Well, you tell a young lady I thank her because I felt a little down because of that. I said, I've devoted most of my life fighting for black folk, not to hate anybody. I never want black folk to hate anybody. I want them necessarily to be against anybody. But I want black folk to understand the nature of the society they live in. I want them to understand the nature of the problem. If they go to a doctor, and I am a doctor, I got 2 different doctor's degrees. If I go to a doctor, and you go to a doctor and say, the first thing the doctor will ask you, what is the nature of your problem? Have you had this problem in your family before? Have anybody else in your family ever had fallen arches or diabetes or asthma? The first thing any doctor would say is, let's first identify the problem, then let's recommend the solutions. Our people always are taking, well, I don't know about the problems, doctor, just give me the solutions. And then how the doctor will give you just write me a prescription, doctor. Don't worry about what it was. Just give me a prescription. I'll handle it. And so I tell black folks, first understand the problem. That's why I wrote the book, Black Labor, White Wealth. They say, here is your problem that we brought into a society, and what they call the American dream, which means Europeans all around the world were invited to come to America to what they call the American dream. And that the American dream was that whites could come to America and get free land and free labor. That's the American dream. And black folk would not get anything because they were excluded from owning anything. They were classified as property. Property cannot own property. So consequently, when slavery ended, blacks had nothing. and they invited into a game to compete. They had nothing to compete with. What are they going to compete with? They were freed in 1864 and 65 and got out of slavery. They were set free, no clothes, no food, no home, no animals, no tools, no weapons, no land, no organizations, no institutions, nothing, nada. And they said, now you go out there and compete with whites. And that time, whites had owned 99.5% of everything in the country.
Hold that thought right there, doctors. We're going to take a break. Folks, our guest is Dr. Claud Anderson, and his book, his best-selling book, Black Labor, White Wealth, and the companion book, Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, tells you how we got into the position we are. And Powernomics tells us how to get out. We're going to look at Powernomics when we come back and look at the politics part of Powernomics. And, folks, you can join us in our discussion at 800-450-7876, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. Take your calls in about.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
And thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is the man with the plan, Dr. Claud Anderson, the only person out there that's doing specifically for black folks. Everybody else, they're doing for multicultural or diversity or some other urban, they use some other term, that just because they're afraid to use the term black. Dr. Anderson is not. And he's uncompromising with his love for black people. Let me just say this. In your book, Powernomics, Doc, you talk about the rules of the game. What do you mean about the rules of the game? They've changed, or are they still the same?
Well, the rules of the game in politics are, first of all, that you must start out by understanding the nature of it. And I told you a few minutes ago that it's based on quid pro quo, something for something. Anybody that runs for an office, public office, they owe you. They're supposed to be protecting you, looking out for your interests. That's why you vote them into office. You don't vote them into office to do for public good. You vote them in first and foremost for your good. You got to be self-centered and self-interested. That's the first thing you must do. The second thing about politics is what we keep missing is that the primary role and obligation of politics is to protect businesses. It's not and wealth in the country. It is not here to try to take care of your small needs and your interests. Unless you make it do it, and to do that, you got to have money, and wealth, and economics. But politics right now is the primary purpose in government and using government through politics is to protect the businesses and the economy and those who got wealth. That's why when black folk got trapped down in Katrina with the hurricane down there, and they were left outside for almost 9 days without any food and water and clothes and anything else, and nobody went to aid them, the first thing the government did, they didn't send tractor-trailer loads of food down there and clothing and beds to take care of those people. The first thing they sent in there was the military. And the military went in there with guns. They're going to protect not the black folk out there that was trapped in Katrina and New Orleans. They can go in there and protect those businesses. And they're going to make sure there will be no looting and breaking into the stores. If there's a national tragedy, it's to take care of businesses. And since black folk only own 1/2 of 1% of the business in the United States, don't own any businesses of any consequence, they're not going to come into your neighborhood to take care of you. They're going to come in and take care of those who own the businesses in your neighborhood. And so that's based on their self-interest, not your interest. So it's quid pro quo. We have never had a political candidate come to us and say, I'm going to run for office. What can I do for you? And black folks, that's what black folks should be doing. They should be calling every candidate and say, yes, you come here, and here's what we want in our neighborhood. We want you to run for an office, and we will vote for you. But here's what you must do. You must do this. You must bring businesses and bring wealth here so that we can build our own businesses in our own community with our own people, buy from our own people, serve our own people, have our own school system in our own communities, and everything around our own group self-interest. That's what they do. They don't do that for black folk, because black folk never demand anything from a candidate. We never demand anything from a candidate running from office. And what the candidate does, every time he comes out and announces what he's doing, he's going to talk about, we're going to put in a new highway here. We're going to put in some new basketball courts here, some lights over here. And you have to say, what are you doing specifically solely to benefit black folks? He said, well, last year we came up with a health care plan. Or we're going to vote to send people to the moon and to Mars, and black folk go for it. But no other group would do that. Other groups would demand things specifically and solely for their group, Carl.
Interesting. I hope the people in Washington, D.C. are listening real hard on that mayoral election coming up. And I know there's a lot of discussion about what they're doing for the once chocolate city. 800-450-7876. Before we get into the new black political orientation, let's go to Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee's on the Pennsylvania side of the Poconos. Mr. Lee, you're on with Dr. Claud Anderson.
Hey, how you doing? I agree with where he's coming from, but I look at it different. I think our biggest obstacle, as a group of people, is not the white people, not the KKK, or not any outside force. It's us. It's kind of like that Samuel Jackson movie, the last part he played where he was, about the slavery thing, where he was saying about he was sticking up for the mass, in other words. I think we got a lot of those people in our community, and they're what they call the gatekeepers. That's what I call them. They're at key positions. I don't care where they're at, and they basically stop the growth of our people and cause division. And I think they do it so cleverly. They come on like a friend. They come on like positive, like they're doing something for us. But underneath it, that's that negative stuff that's still there if you don't go along with the program. And I think that's what should be studied more, not what the white people do, but what we do to each other. But,
all right. Mr. Lee, let us give Doc Anderson a chance to respond.
Well, he's absolutely right, and that's why I said I've never tried to hold white folks basically responsible for what I saw them as being half of what our problem comes from what white folks did. The other half is what we're doing to ourselves. You're right, and see, but what you call the blacks that are misleading you, they're called a black overclass. A black overclass means those individuals who have access to the prominent white society. And what the white society does, they typically have a name and list all those people, and they co-opt them. They co-opt them and bring them into the structure. And once you get inside the structure, you can do absolutely nothing because now they own and control you. Any black person you see on TV and hear them every day on the radio or read about them in the newspaper on a regular basis, they've already been co-opted. And anytime any issue affects black folk, they're going to switch it from black folk to multicultural, to diversity, to people of color, to socially disadvantaged, to gays, to women, anything other than black folk. And in a few minutes, as a matter of fact, I'm going to pull a book, I'm going to read a quote. And this came out specifically, the first time I heard this little switch, it's called bait and switch. Bait and switch. You know what bait and switch means? Bait and switch means where they advertise something. You come down to a store, and they advertise it and put up pictures about what you're going to get. When you get there, they switch it to something else. They tell you to come down to our store and get steak. When you get there, it's a pork chop. And that's what blacks are taught to do in politics, the black overclass. And the first time I ever heard that was back with Martin Luther King, way back, talked about he in one of his major speeches back in the 1960s. He gave this very beautiful speech about the dilemma of black folk in America and the major problem we were having, that we have not recovered from slavery, that we're still owning and controlling nothing of any magnitude, of any value. And that we never make up more than 1/2 or 1% of anything that's good in our society, and we're carrying 7 to 8 times our fair share of everything that's bad. And so what Martin Luther King recommended after he articulated all these negative things about black folk in prison, black folk this, black folk that, blacks are serving here, blacks in prison. And then he said, what we need, so they said, what do you think you black folk need? He said, we need a Bill of Rights. We need a Bill of Rights.
Can I say something?
No, but let me finish this point, then you can have it.
Okay, sorry.
So we need a Bill of Rights, but instead of him saying we need a Bill of Rights for black folk, he switched that we need a Bill of Rights for disadvantaged people. That's where the bait and switch came. And since that time now, every issue, it came out later, and that's what Moynihan made when he put out what's called a benign neglect policy. The Daniel Moynihan memo sent to Nixon say the way you shut down black folk in America is take the focus off of black folk and put on minority, women, immigrants. And that's how Wild Night now. Every time you talk about black folk in this country, nobody's going to listen to you. The issue will be changed over baiting to talk about black folk, and they'll switch and talk about gays. Gays are going to be the prominent thing. Nobody's enslaved in the gays in this country. Gays never put in 500 years of slavery. As a matter of fact, some of the biggest slaveholders in America were gay. The Two Sister Restaurant down in New Orleans, go all the way back, we had 2 gay women. They were the biggest slaveholders in New Orleans, and they had the biggest restaurant that still exists.
One question for you.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Isn't a solution for this, especially in a capitalist system, the way it's made, and even with Russia, when it turned to capitalism, it's like the underground, like a mafia, or even the United States when they first came over here. They took over by force, where there was a small group, because it's like a Shaka Zulu in Africa. You need some type of underground, because we're the only fair players on this field, this capitalist field. We come in like thinking it's a fair game, but underneath, even China, they got the triad, all this kind of stuff. The Mexicans got their own secret money coming in. We're the only ones that, how can I say, quick solution? We need that muscle behind it. What do you think of that? Like a mafia, how they took over, the Jews even did that, to get a foothold in the capitalist system, because money backs the politics. and it forces people to go in business well.
Well,
I condone it, but what are you thinking of the idea?
Well, it's absolutely right. I've said on a number of occasions, you need some kind of institutionalized way of protecting yourself, and that's always been true, and that's true in every society except ours. And about capitalism, about politics. See, politics is not based on what you vote. Nobody cares about your vote. Your vote means nothing when you're a planned, systematically made a minority. See, in this country, black folks' vote has always been basically totally useless. Why? Because the first law passed by Congress in 1790 was called the first immigration and nationalization law. We say this is a white country and basically blacks can only come here as slaves. We were made a permanent minority. That's why up until the present time, up to about 11 years ago, blacks were always outnumbered 8-1 by whites. And now that Hispanics have now come in this country in massive influx, and that the population of Hispanics has more than doubled or tripled in the last 25 years, now Hispanics have surpassed us. Now we're now number 9-1. And what does that mean? That means in politics, if I were to throw a rabbit into a cage with 9 hungry bulldogs to tell the rabbit you got a chance to vote on what everybody's going to have for lunch, nobody cares about his vote.
Exactly.
And because you haven't gotten the power, the black vote is totally useless. But if you read the Powernomics book, you can have power, and I'll explain that to you later when Carl gets to that point. Because
we got to take a break. Mr. Lee, thanks for your call. And we're going to move more into Powernomics, folks. And you need to pick up this book and understand what Dr. Anderson is talking about. You can join us, too, at 800-450-7876, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. Take your calls for Dr. Anderson in about 2 hours.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us, folks. And our guest, Dr. Claud Anderson, the man with a plan. Dr. Anderson, in your book, Powernomics, you say political action step 1 is to promote group self-interest and use political acts to empower black America. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, and that typically, I guess everybody understands that one again but us. And that's why all these other people, they demand things specifically solely for their group. Let me give you an example, Carl. You hear all the debates going on right now. You hear about everybody talking about rights. And they say, well, you go to the marketplace. First thing you learn in politics is never go into a political arena and fighting for something that's very broad and ambiguous. Never go into a fighting for something that's broad and ambiguous that you cannot measure and you cannot determine. You don't go get into a fight I'm fighting for freedom. What you got to define what you mean by freedom. I'm fighting for equality. You can't have equality in a competitive society. That's the whole point of having competition, is to eliminate equality. The whole point of competition is to create inequality. And I hear blacks say, we need economic equality. You can't get it. You got to go in there prepared to fight for your own group self-interest. That's the first thing you must do. Now, if you go in there, when you go into the public arena, you see these other groups, the gays will go in there. They're going to fight for gay rights. They're going to go fight for rights. Women are going to fight for women's rights. Veterans are going to fight for veterans' rights. Senior citizens are going to fight for senior citizens' rights. When you get to Hispanics fight for Hispanic rights, Asians for Asian rights, Jews for Jewish. When you get to black folk, they don't fight for black rights. You have never, probably in your lifetime, ever heard anybody talk about fighting for black rights. Blacks go in there, they want to fight for civil rights. And nobody ever asks, who in the world is civil? Why don't you fight for your own rights? Why don't you fight for black rights, something that's peculiar to black folk that you can get your hands on and measure? Don't fight for something that's symbolic for your race, like I want equal opportunities. How do you determine equal opportunity? What does that mean? Well, I want equality. You can't have equality. It doesn't exist. The only time you can have equality is that you must have equal ownership and control of the resources and the wealth and the power. If you don't have equal control of the wealth and resources and the power, you can't have equality. But black folk will ask for those things that they cannot measure, they can't see, they can't touch, they can't feel, they can't smell. And they should go in and say, look, I want something that's black. I want black rights, and I want it tangible. I want this much in money and houses, clothes, food, things that you can measure and count that your people can enjoy and raise themselves up to a better quality of life in their own communities.
Now, Doc, do the other groups understand that we're not asking for that and they're asking for that? Are they looking at our politicians and our elected officials like, these guys are stupid?
That's right. Well, they use your officials. They use your officials. Every other group use black officials to accomplish their self-interest. They use black folk like toilet paper. They use them to bring about betterment for their lives. Almost every black elected official will be out there right now fighting for gay rights, and women's rights, Hispanic rights, Asian rights, anything but black rights. Go find me a politician right now who's fighting for black rights. That's how they won't even use the word black. They won't even come close to the word black. The closest they come is African American. And there you go again. That's the term that Jesse promoted back in the 1960s, African rights. African American. Now, again, you can't measure what an African American is. What is an African American? Since all human beings migrated out of Africa, the first human beings, whether you follow archaeological facts or the biblical scholarly reports, historical exams of manuscripts, they said the first human beings and the Garden of Eden was in Africa. So therefore, all human beings on earth came out of Africa. And anybody who now comes to America is qualified to be called an African American. That's why politically, when we had one about 10 years ago, one Pakistani came to Washington, D.C. He went over to Howard University, University of Maryland, rather, and he applied for a Banneker Scholarship. The Banneker Scholarship was put in place for African Americans. He applied for the scholarship, and he was denied. They said it was for African Americans. He went to the Supreme Court in Maryland and sued and won. He won $150,000 because the black folk had set up a program under a broad heading, ambiguous heading, called African Americans. And so he said, I'm an African American. I used to live in Africa, and I moved from Pakistan to Africa. Then I moved from Africa to America. Now I'm an African American. And he won, and the courts awarded him $150,000. Because see, how can you define your self-interest when you can't even define who you are? You're afraid to identify with who you are. You don't talk about black rights. You talk about multicultural, diversity, minorities. What person go out and call himself a minority? A minority means loser. So if you can't define yourself in a very specific way so you can get very specific benefits and demand that a politician bring those benefits home to you, to your community, you'll never get anything, Carl.
All right. 800-450-7876. Go to line 1. Lawrence is joining us from Arlington, Texas. Lawrence, you have a question for Dr. Anderson.
Yes, Brother Carl, I have a question and I have a comment. The first comment is, Brother Carl, you and Dr. Claud Anderson, y'all two of the baddest brothers that are very deserving of respect, because you brought that brother and he's speaking truth. And that brother is not afraid to speak truth. And he has put everything, all the questions that I had, in perspective. Because for the love of me, I've been trying to figure out, because my background is in union politics and local politics. And I've been wondering, and my wife, we talk about the same thing what the doctor is talking about. Why is it inside the unions, the UAW, you got blacks who will not advocate for blacks having a seat at the table in the union politics? They will speak about everybody and everything else, but we ain't. And right now, blacks are being excluded out of the blue-collar jobs in the labor market. That's the dirty little secret that's going on in America. And Dr. Anderson put everything in perspective, gave me the ammunition to go back and speak some more truth to power, because the bottom line of it is, Carl, we are in serious, serious hurt. And the gatekeepers, them rascals who don't want nobody else to achieve the goals that were set out for us thousands of years ago, these people are a real problem. That other brother who called, he spoke truth. It's not the white man. He plays a role. It is the black man or the blacks who fear being black.
Right. Lawrence, put in a question for him because we're running up close to the top of the hour.
The question
I want
is,
Doc to respond.
Dr. Anderson, is it true that in order to clean your house and to live healthful and peaceful, you have to rid yourself of the parasites and the rodents that infest your house? And the house that I'm talking about is Black America. If in order for us to get where we need to go, don't we got to do some house cleaning? Some serious house cleaning. We got to take these people to task, call them out for what they are. I'm not advocating violence. I'm just advocating calling them out, making life miserable for these people. Because, like you say, they're co-opted.
Let's give him a chance to respond because we're coming to close to the top of the hour. Thanks, Lawrence.
Well, Lawrence, you're absolutely right. You do have to do that. But what you got to do, you got to institutionalize a code of conduct. See, all these other communities have code of conduct. Even the mafia has a code of conduct. The mafia says, you sell us out as a family, you better run. We're going to get you. And I learned that about 25 years ago when I was on an international committee that had the Indians on it, Hispanics and Chinese, and everybody said, Dr. Harris, we have codes of conduct in Chinatown. we have the hatchet men and the tongs, which means you sell us out in Chinatown, we're coming after you. Black folk don't have a code of conduct that says you cannot go around and sell us out, betray us, and do things that are detrimental to us as a people and expect to come back home. We need to have a code of conduct. We need to learn how to enforce it. And if black folk don't want to hear to it, then you excommunicate them out of the race and tell them that, and you call them out. And in Detroit, Michigan, they set up a program to call black folk out every year in February, saying that they have a vote saying we're going to call out the biggest Sambos in the city, and we're going to have a vote, and we have a big party the last day in February and the end of the month to celebrate who the biggest Sambos are in the city that sold us out. That's why the city right now is going bankrupt, because they were sold out by these Sambos. Down in Dallas, Texas, you had another group down there that did the same thing. They would go around every night, and they would call these individuals that are selling the black folk out. They didn't care. In some sense, one of the chief of police down there. They would put your picture on a telephone post on a fence, and advertise it that saying, "Stay away from this black person. He's selling us out." And they enforce the code, and they publicize it, and they enforce it against those black folks. Said, if you're going to be with us, you're not going to do these bad things, the harmful things to us, and go take care of Mexican and women and gays and forget and ignore us. And we've been here for 500 years. We built the country through our sweat and our labor, and you're going to give everybody else the benefits.
Well, you know, he's in Arlington, and there was a fellow on the radio in Dallas, which Arlington is close by Dallas, and he would give out the award, the Toby Award. And he on the radio, he would just tell who's selling out in the community, and they'd award the Toby Award. And I'm sure if Lawrence has been down in the Dallas area, he's probably heard that fellow on the radio. I don't think he's on anymore.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of my friends. That's one of my friends on the county commissioner down there that you're talking about. He called it the Toby Award. Yeah, that's
the Toby Award.
That's why.
Aren't you familiar with that?
Yeah, and they would have posters and circulate them all over the city. And they have a wall in the black community. They go paint your picture on the wall and tell black folk, avoid this guy at all costs. And see, when that begins to happen, these black folk that are selling you out will come beg you, say, please take my picture off the wall, off the fence, and off that tree. I promise I'll never do those bad things to my people anymore.
Wow. Do we have enough trees?
I don't know. but somehow you have to stop people. You have to stop people. And the problem right now with black people is that we don't have the wealth and the power. See, other groups, they stop their people wealth and power. They have a way either rewarding you or punishing you for doing things that they don't like. And see, with the black community, since we are powerless with no money and no wealth, we don't control any business of any magnitude or any institutions, we cannot reward people for selling us out and doing us in. But we have to start holding people accountable, saying you got a responsibility and obligation to our people to not sell our people out. If you disagree with what we're saying, keep your mouth shut.
Right. That's all right. Hang on, Doc.
Put you on TV.
Thanks, Lawrence, for your call, because we got to take a break at the top there. And when we come back, I want to talk about immigration, which you have in your book, Powernomics. Folks, our guest is Dr. Claud Anderson, the man with the plan. That's what I call him. He's the only one who's got a plan for black people, specifically. And he's unabashedly, he's for black, and that's it. Okay? 800-450-7876 number. Call, speak to him, or hit me up on Facebook and Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. You can also like us there as well. We'll take your phone calls for Dr. Anderson in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Dr. Claud Anderson. I call him the man with a plan because he's the only one who's got a plan for black folks to survive in this country. His books, Dirty Little Secrets, there's a 3 set of books, and there's Black Labor, White Wealth. That was a bestseller, and there's another one bestseller, a companion book, is Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth. Tells us how we got into this situation that we're in. You need to read all 3 books, and Powernomics, which I'm reading from now, is one that tells us how to get out of this situation. In the Powernomics book, Dr. Anderson, you said we should challenge immigration laws and public policies that have forced black people to become this nation's only non-immigrant and permanent minority. Now, you wrote this book before this immigration stuff even came to the forefront. Did you see this was coming down the pike? Is Dr. Anderson there?
If they need the books, then they should read all these books. And right now, we're running a power pack where they can get all 4 of those #1 best-selling books in the country. And they're classic books that explain everything they need to know about what's going on in the country. They can get them by going to the www.powernomics.com website and order them off the line at Powernomics, www.powernomics.com, and order them. Or they can call the Powernomics Corporation's office. That telephone number is 301-564-6075. Again, they can call the office. That's 301 564-6075, and they get a power pack. The power pack, they can get all 4 books for $70. And those are #1 selling books, and they're not like any other books you've ever read in this country. And you never find this kind of positive information, comprehensive analysis and solutions to show you how you got into something, what you got to do to get out, and why you should be considering yourselves to be special people.
Right. Now,
okay, now to answer your question about immigration, you see, what black people have been ignoring is that any immigrants, all throughout history, immigration was a major negative for black folk. And that's why when the country first originated under English rule, one of the first things they set up, as I said, was the national immigration laws and nationalization laws to invite people into the country. But they were only inviting people in of European origin, and because they were classified as whites coming into the country. That way, that made black folk would be a permanent loser, a permanent minority in the society. And as these immigrants come in, they displace black folk. They displace you out of jobs. They displace you out of territory, out of space, out of economics, and out of politics. It's a displacement process to bring in immigrants. Immigrants do not enhance the life of black folk. It dampens it. It wipes you out. It keeps you locked into a lower level. All these immigrants come into the society over you because of a federal policy. And that's why up until 1970, for instance, Hispanics were classified as whites. American Indians were classified basically as whites. And Asians and on probation to be whites. Arabs were classified as whites. And so, but yet they became minorities when they found out they could get benefits by kicking black folk out of the minority programs and classifying themselves as a minority. They can come in over black folk. Only 3/10 of 1% of all those people in America call themselves Hispanics or black people. Only 3/10 of 1. The rest classified as whites. And so when they come in this country, black folk got to compete with all those Hispanics. Now let me go back for a second to show how that hurt black folk. Let's go back to 1900. Let's go back a little further. Let's go back to the 1860s. In 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, you had less than 4,000 Hispanics in the entire United States. In 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, you had less than 4,000 people call themselves Hispanics. At that time, they were Mexicans in the entire United States. But you had almost 5 million black folk who were slaves. So that means that the Hispanics were only 4,000 or less. Black folk were over 5 million. Now watch this progression. Now by 1900, the number of Hispanics in the United States went up. It went up to almost 100,000 Hispanics in the United States in 1900. But by then, the number of blacks in the society were over 11 million black folk. So when the Hispanics got 100,000, we had over 11 million black folk in the United States. And at that point in time, they began to have the same birth rate in this society, and for the next 100 years. And guess what happened? By the year 2000, Hispanics not only caught black folk, they passed black folk, and they passed black folk. Why? Because Hispanics poured in this country almost 4,000 or 5,000 at a time, and what they did, they had between the year 1900 and the year 2000, the number of Hispanics in the United States went up over 36,000%. They went up over 36,000%. And why? Because the National Hispanic Party met in Kansas City back in 1975 and says, what we're going to do now is draw up a National Hispanic Party, and the first thing on our agenda is to displace black folk as the number 2 population in America. We're going to displace them by the year 2000. Up until that point in time, blacks were second-class citizens until the year 2000. In the year 2000, Hispanics surpassed black folk right on the money, and they became the number 2 population and pushed black folk back to number 3. Where black folk had been number 2, second-class citizens in the United States for 400 years, they now are third-class citizens. And in about another 11 or 12 years, Asians and Arabs are going to combine. They're going to push black folk back and make them fourth-class citizens, which means that if blacks didn't get a darn thing for being second-class citizens for 500 years, tell them to use their creative imagination to figure out what they can get when they become fourth-class citizens.
Wow. Since we're on that subject, I got a tweet earlier, and I guess I'll ask the question now, because the new head or the acting head of the NAACP wasn't getting involved in the Washington Redskins, the name change for the Washington Redskins. As people said that was a good thing because that doesn't concern us. Those are Indians, and Indians had slaves. So how does that fit into the equation of what you're talking about?
Well, it fits excellent because you almost every group on earth has owned blacks as slaves. They profited and benefited off of black folk. They elevated their people, their community, and their race and their ethnic group off of black folk. And it started off, the first people to enslave black folk were Arabs. Then it went to the Portuguese. Then it left the Portuguese and went to the Hispanics. Then from that to the French. Then to the Germans. Then to the British. Then to the Swedes. And then to the Asians. And the last ones to enslave black folk were the American Indians. All these so-called civilized tribes were slaveholders, slave chasers, and they fought, signed agreements with the Southerners, with the Confederate South, to fight against the North to keep black slavery in existence, because they said they had invested so much money into black slaves they were not going to turn them loose. The Indians in this country ignored the Emancipation Proclamation. They ignored the 13th Amendment. They ignored the Civil War victory, which says you couldn't have slaves in the United States. And so by 1866, in the United States, the Choctaw and Chickasaw Indians were still holding 12,000 to 15,000 blacks as slaves, because they got paid on the average about $20 to $25 for every black who ran away. They're bringing back to the plantation, and they got paid for owning it, and they did not want to give up their black slaves. And so consequently, when they started enslaving so many blacks, they then started calling them civilized. That's why the Cherokee and Chickasaw, and Choctaw, and Seminole Indians, all of them were slave-holding nations. They own and control black folk. And here we are now. They're being invited to Washington, D.C. every year by the President of the United States to come to Washington, D.C. and get special benefits. The descendants of slave-holding Indians are getting free benefits off the 1866 Indian Treaty. This 1866 Indian Treaty that all the civilized tribes signed says that the government says you must release all these slaves, and you must do 5 to 9 things for them. 1, you must free every black slave, or you Indians will never get on any land in the United States. We might give you a reservation if you release your black slaves. Point 1. Point 2, you must give all those slaves a chance, or those black Indians a chance to have membership in the tribe they wanted. So you've been holding them so long and mistreating them. Point 3, you must give them at least $150 in money. Point 4, you must give them 160 acres of land. Point 5, you must share any benefits, the proceeds that the government sends down to you, like clothes, housing, and medical care. Point 7, you must make sure that they are tax exempt, don't have to pay the taxes. Point 8, they can go to any school without paying a tuition. Point 9, that they have access to all the resources on a reservation. That means gold, silver, chrome, bauxite, magnesium, timber. And 10, that they can come to the government and get contracts just like all these Indians can. Now, Obama approved a program recently where Indians can get all this cable system, television, and radio stations free. They don't have to go through all these changes black folk got to fight and compete for. But that 1866 treaty was built for black folk. And the last thing is that black folks should be able to build casinos just like these Indians. And we got blacks over in PG County, for instance, trying to build casinos. If we win these lawsuits that we currently have in the federal claims court and the appeals court, and the blacks over in America will rise up and demand that the United States government enforce the 1866 Indian Treaty fairly. They're enforcing that 1866 Indian Treaty for all those tribes. They're enforcing it only for whites who are passing as Indians. They're not enforcing it for the black folk. The treaties were put in place for black folk, for black Indians and black freemen. And for 140 years they've denied black folk these benefits. And that's why black folk must start putting pressure on every politician, black or white alike. And it's not a political issue, but it's been made into a political issue. It is a law. A treaty is a law.
Hang on, Doc, because we're going to take another break here. When we come back, I want us to move on to step 3, vertical integration. And you explain, I'll let you explain to us what that means.
Okay.
Folks, you're going to join the conversation with Dr. Anderson. It's simple, 800-450-7876. Or hit me up on Facebook at carlnelsonshow.com. We'll take your calls in about 3 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Dr. Claud Anderson, folks, the man with a plan. Our man's got a plan for black folks to get out of the situation that we're in. And I guess we all agree that we're in a terrible situation. In your book, Powernomics, Dr. Anderson, you talk about we should use vertical integration in politics. What do you mean by that?
Well, let me get to that too. But last point I was going to make on economics, so I told you how the number of immigrants increased by over 36,000%. Tell black folk, your listeners, tell them, remember that for every 10% increase in the number of immigrants coming to the country, the native black Americans were reduced by 0.3% in their income. So you have my point? That their income goes down by, again, in the black community, it goes down by 0.3% or 1% for every 10% increase in the number of immigrants coming to the country. And you've had and the Hispanics went from 100,000 to now they got about 44 million. That's why you're not going to get ahead. Let's go to your second question. But keep in mind that what I'm telling you is not information to go out and be hating any other group. Don't hate Hispanics and Arabs and Asians. They're just doing the best thing they can for their own people. It's our people, and what we're not doing is hurting people. It's not even whites now that's hurting us. It's the lack of black leadership that's hurting us. Now to go back to, and that's why this for your vertical integration is very pointed at this point. Now vertical integration means that when we elect a black politician to an office, and particularly the highest office in the land, that there should be some kind of a umbilical cord that extends from the lowest level in the black community all the way up to the highest level of a political office, and the communications and resources should travel up and down that line like a telephone line or electric line to produce resources and effect change for those people at the bottom. And in the old days, we used to have it used to be called a ward system, and that's why all these other immigrants got over very well back in the 1800s. It's called the old ward system. And Italians were very effective in the Irish ward. They had Irish wards and Italian wards and Jewish wards. And a ward system, what does the word ward, you hear about the ward system, even in Chicago, when I grew up when I was in school, in the university over there in Chicago, they had a ward system where everything you want, you just go tell your ward leader what you needed, and he will go fight your battles for you. We need a ward system, a vertical system for black folk in this country. And a ward system, the word ward means someone who has a responsibility to protect you and look out for you. And black folk don't have nobody out there protecting them. They need to go back to the old ward system. That's the first thing. And secondly, that they have to understand that the ward system unified the people in the community, kept them together, and delivered benefits to them. And also it was an effective means of communication, and also it gave them influence and information about how to vote and how to best use their votes. And then there's always also a way of holding any other politician in and around them accountable. Now, presently, immigrants are now got a ward system going. They're using black elected officials. Where they don't have an elected officials in the country, they buy black elected officials. That's why the Indians put in $18 million just to buy elected officials, including some of our black officials in Congress. They use our officials, our elected officials in these major urban cities. Other groups, the immigrants, use our black elected officials as a ward system to bring benefits to them, specifically in that group, and bring nothing to black folk. And our black leaders then give them access to the highest levels of government to help them develop programs and public policies that benefits them while they ignore their own people.
All right. 800-450-7876. You also talk about supporting a network, a national network of black research institutes.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why we create the Harvest Institute, Carl, because right now the days of old charismatic black leadership is gone. So for years, we should always look forward to find us a charismatic black leader. Say we got to get a black leader we can follow, somebody who's a minister who can preach and teach, and we'll follow him any place he wants to go. And see, what black folk need now, they need leadership that won't die, won't grow old, and can't be assassinated and bought off. That's the kind of leadership they need. They need institutionalized leadership, and we should have had that in the Urban League and NAACP and the Rainbow Coalition, but we never had it. We need to have some organizations that speak strictly and solely for black folk and carries the water for black folk. And right now, the Urban League and all those other groups, and some of them are good people in them. I'm not casting aspersion on all of them. There are some good people in the Urban League, good people in the Rainbow Coalition, good people in all these organizations. I'm just speaking generically that right now they don't carry water for black folks. If you go ask the Urban League, they say, well, we carry the water for poor people and minorities. And you go to ask the NAACP, they say, we carry the water for multicultural and diversity. You ask Jesse, he said, we carry the water for social disadvantage and the rainbow. Nobody represents black folk. We need some institutional leadership. We have no institutional leadership in America, and we don't have any more charismatic leaders. And if we did have any, as I said to you earlier, they've been bought off, assassinated, and co-opted into the structure. And so the minute you see them on TV and or in the newspaper, you better run and bend and don't bend over because you're going to be had. The black leadership now, they've learned how to do what I call the moonwalk. On racial issues, your black leadership in America does the moonwalk. They give a pretense they're moving forward when they're moving backwards. And therefore, that's why black folk don't make any progress in the country. They camouflage their moves and give black folk the erroneous impression that progress is occurring. And every time you look around, they be coming up again in February. They're going to talk about how far we've come, how far we've advanced racially in this country. At the same time, we're going backwards all over America. In every major urban city in America, that's the 10 largest cities, black folk are living like animals. They're slaughtering each other, killing each other, no food, no water, no health. They're displaced, they're homeless, and yet your leadership's going to be doing the moonwalk on them, telling them how well off we are.
Wow. 800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. Anderson. We're going to go through the Powernomics book. Some folks have been home for a while. Let's go to line 1. Jay's in D.C. Jay, you're on with Dr. Anderson. You have a question for him?
Yeah, my question is, why like America always say they the land of the free and this and that, and they help every other race. Why don't they help us? You understand what I'm saying? I've never understood why don't they, what's so hard about helping us? Like, you help Hispanics, but you don't help us, and I don't understand that part of it. Like, why? What's so different about us that you just don't want to help us?
That's a good question. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for your call. Dr. Anderson?
Well, they don't want to do it for a number of reasons. One reason they want to do it for you because they feel guilty about what they've done to you. And that's the first thing. And if they were to bring you out of the shadows, then guilt will emerge in them again. That's one thing. The second thing is that they are scared to death of you. They know that if they were to empower you, where you had an appropriate number of businesses, and you were an effective person in politics, and you had good, strong institutional leadership in your communities, and if you had functional communities, competitive communities with businesses, and if you had an alternative economy in America that was not dependent on the white society or any of these other societies, that would scare the devil out of them. See, if black folk had towns like Asian towns and Arab towns and Little Mexico and Little Havanas and Japan towns and China towns, that would scare the devil out of white folk. That's exactly what black folk need. They don't want you to be independent. See, whites don't want you necessarily with them, but they don't want you really too far away from them. They just want you in a state where you're just there so that anybody can pick and pluck you anytime they want to and do whatever they want, and you can't do anything about it. And the only way black folk are going to be a competitive people is to build their own and control their own resources, wealth, buy from their own people, have their own alternative economy, and place that first before trying to get along with other people, trying to compromise. Before you try to hook up with and co-op and do things for Asians, Arabs, Hispanics, and women and gays, do something for your own people first. No prince is going to marry a pauper. Take care of your own first. We don't want to do that. And that's why they don't want to do anything for you, because they're scared. Two, they don't want you competing with them. And thirdly, because they have a federal policy that says they can bring all these other people in here, and they're going to classify all these people as whites. That's why up until 1970, all Hispanics in the United States were classified as whites. Asians were classified as whites. Arabs were classified as whites. Asians Arabs were classified as whites. Asians on probation to be white. And so consequently, black folk are the only people that's outside the loop. And that way, you're always an expendable group where anybody can make money off of you. That's why 97 to 98% of every dollar that black folk pass through their hands, it goes right out and it subsidizes business, Arab businesses, Chinese, Asian businesses, white businesses. You cannot support yourself or sustain yourself because you have no wealth and no businesses and no jobs. But anybody can use you to start a business because they know that you're going to have to buy from them because you don't own and control any resources. You have no drug stores, no department stores. You have nothing. You have maybe 2 hospitals in the entire United States. Black folk own and control nothing. Maybe you might have 5 blacks in America that have more than a 2- or 3-story building.
And which begs the question, because you mentioned this too in your book, that we should start our own party. How viable is that, though? That's the most significant thing black folk can do. That would be the most significant. That would scare the devil out of all these other groups. It would scare the devil out of them because, see, right now your vote is totally useless. But people again, they bamboozle you and tell you about how important your vote is to vote. Why in the world why would my vote be important if I'm outnumbered 9-1? If I'm systematically planned to be a permanent minority and I'm outnumbered 9-1, why is my vote important? Anybody that has more than a high school education would say, hey, well, if I'm only a small percentage of the population, whites can do anything they want to do. They can vote in there. They don't need the black vote. Whites don't need the black vote to put Ronald Reagan in office or anybody. I think whites can put anybody they want in office anytime they want them because they got the population. And they've got these other groups that also, these sub-ethnic groups that are also classified as whites. They don't need the black vote, but they bamboozle blacks by saying you got to go out and exercise your right. And that's like having blacks taking crack cocaine because you got to go out and exercise your right. You don't go to the polls and vote to get exercise. You go there to get benefits. But they know they're not going to give you any benefits. So consequently, you get engaged in a process that you never win in.
So what black folk have to say is that if I'm never going to win in politics, then, because I'm not playing to win, let me start playing to win. So how do you play to win? Right now, black folk would be the most powerful group in America if they were to do two things. First, if they were to cease and desist, splitting themselves up between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. If all the blacks in America, if 42 million black folks says tomorrow, we're going to become independents. We're going to become independents. We're not going to belong to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. Because we learned that that's called divide and conquer. If I'm stupid enough to let people tell me some of you should be Democrats, that's divide and conquer. Anybody tells you that is bamboozling you. That's like
hold that thought right there, Doc, because we got to take another break, and I'll let you finish up on this notion that we should have our own independent party and how we can work and how it will fit in. I want you to explain that to us. Folks, you can join that conversation with Dr. Anderson at 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls in about.
This podcast was recorded by BKRpodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us, and our guest, the man with a plan, that's what I like to call him, Dr. Claud Anderson. He's the only one who's got a comprehensive plan for black folks. His book's laid out for you. Black Labor, White Wealth tells us how we got into the situation that we're in right now. We know it's dire. And Powernomics is a workbook. It tells us how to get out of that situation. He's also got a compendium of two books, Dirty Little Secrets, and before the end of the show, we'll tell you how you can get your hands on them. But you should have these books. I mean, we're going through Powernomics, talking about the politics here. And Dr. Anderson says we should form our own political party. And you told us that that would scare the other folks. But what else would it do, Dr. Anderson? How could we benefit from it?
Well, see, and keep in mind, Carl, I have to reiterate this on your show, that what I'm telling black folks to do in analyzing their condition and telling them, suggesting the ways of countering the strategies and becoming economically and politically competitive does not mean they have to be against anybody else. But unfortunately, we live in a society that any time you try to help black folk, they think you're against somebody else, that you're teaching hate, or it's too black. See, nobody ever says anything about Jews being too Jewish or whites being too white or Asian being too Asians. But anytime you start talking about helping black folk, that's too black. But I tell black folks, don't hate anybody. Just go read these books and learn how to play the game and learn how to compete. Learn how to compete politically and economically. And one of the best ways to compete politically is if you really want to play the game, because right now your vote means absolutely nothing. You're not going to get anything. You're not going to get anything at the local level, in the city levels, directly for black folk. You're not going to get anything at the federal level for black folk. And if you go to the website and start looking up any kind of program, you see everybody there. You see programs for minorities, programs for women, programs for Asians, programs for anybody, for veterans, but you never see anything for programs for black folk. But if you're going to win, this is the way you win. And I used to be a Democrat, but now I'm an independent. What you must do is learn how to pool your votes. Pool your votes. Just like you pool your fingers and make a fist, you pool your votes and make a hammer. And what you do, you pool your votes, and how do you pool your votes? You create a black independent party. The biggest movement, if you read in my books, and in that chapter, I predicted that by 2013, the biggest party in America would be the independent party. Go check anywhere in America. That was written almost 15 years ago. I predicted exactly what you're saying. Now, the biggest party in America is not the Democrats, Republic, it's the independents. If blacks were to create an independent party, an all-black party, nationally, and learn how to vote as a block. Vote as a block. And quit letting black folk get on TV and do what no other group would do. Always talking about we're not monolithic. We don't all think the same. We don't all do this the same. You'll never hear another group talking about that. You'll never hear another group go on TV and talk about how disunified and disorganized they are. They always stick together publicly and do things in the best interest of themselves and their group. Black folk must learn to do the same thing. Vote as a block. And once you vote, set up your black independent party nationally, then the first thing you do is make sure that you never run any candidates. Never run any candidates for office. And your motto should be, we will vote for and support any candidate for a public office that promises the most and delivers to black folk. We don't care whether you're white, yellow, brown, or polka dot. Whoever promises the most and will deliver the resources into the hands of black folk, we will vote. And we'll give you 42 million votes. And when the rest of these people find out that they can now go out and pick up 42 million votes just out of the black community, you would see every politician in this country running over trying to court black folk. It's just like if she's the prettiest woman in town, everybody will be outside her door yelling, can I take you out? Can I take you to dinner or lunch? They would come courting black folk. They found out that blacks were voting as a block. and they will vote for whoever promises the most and delivers the black folk. And they will vote not based on partisanship, what political party you belong to. Political parties mean nothing when you're talking about getting resources. And see, black folk for up until from the slavery time in the 1500s up until about 1860s, they didn't belong to any party at that time. But they joined the Republican Party up to the 1940s. They got nothing. Got re-enslaved and Jim Crow segregated. Since the 1940s, they've been belonging to the Democratic Party. They don't get anything. You have to pull out and vote as a solid block. Say, we got 42 million votes. We'll give you, all you got to do is promise and deliver the black folk. Make them show up in your community and come on the stage and say, and promise, here's what I'll do for you all. And say,
let me interrupt you for a second, Doc. Isn't that what some of our quote-unquote leaders do? They go to the other people and tell them, I can deliver the black vote?
Right. See, and what you said, and you can say, yeah, you can deliver the black vote, but you're going to sign a contract with us. When you come into my community, every black politician, make them come to your community. You don't go to a center to see them or listen to them. You make them come into your community. Right now, the politicians have the nasty habit of just saying, I'm gonna be downtown speaking. Y'all come turn out and bring me some money. You said, no, you come into my community and come on the stage. I want you to come there. All of you come at the same time. Line them all up. You got 4 or 5 people running for the office. Have all 4 or 5 of them come at the same time and come out one at a time. Give each one of them about 3 to 5 minutes at most. And so you come on the stage before this audience and tell us specifically what you're going to do for black folk, point 1, and write it down. Say, this is a contract. Then 2, tell us in the promise that you're going to come back and give an accounting to us within 3 years of exactly how many things you carried out. And point 3, if you don't do it, we're going to have a recall and run you out of office. It's just that simple. And fifthly, don't come in and tell them about how you're going to hire a black secretary or you're going to put some basketball lights on the court. That won't cut it. We want to know what you're going to deliver in tangible benefits like wealth, businesses, opportunities, and jobs for them.
All right. 800-450-7876. Go to line 3. Steve's in California. Steve, you have a question for Dr. Anderson? Steve on there?
Dr. Anderson talked about starting our own party. Carl, that's been done before. I mean, Marcus Garvey talked about starting a party. Hubert Harrison, Ida B. Wells, even Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. I think if you're going to do something like that, everybody has to be on board. And I know a lot of people are not going to be on board, but you're not going to be able to bring everyone along. And I think that's one of the things we have to understand because we're too distracted. I mean, it seems like everything that comes along right now, especially. I mean, Carl, you were just talking about the young man who hated being black and the Canadian. I mean, that's a distraction. We talked about the N-word. Charles Barkley was talking about how he could use it and everybody else. Those things are just nothing but distraction. I mean, it's not going to do anything to move us in the 21st century because I don't think we really understand what's going on. And Claud Anderson's been saying this for a long time. My question to Mr. Anderson is, I mean, I've had some of your books, and, you make some pretty sound ideas, but have you pitched this to people like Earl Graves, Magic Johnson? I mean, have you brought people together in a big forum and said, look, guys, this is what we have to do? I mean, I know,
Steve, that's a good question because we're running out of time. I'm going to give him a chance, and hopefully, because I know Doctor, hopefully he'll tell it like it is. But Doc, I'll let you respond. Good question.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let me answer that. Tell you this. Yes, not directly for those specific people. Most of the blacks I know in the movie stars, entertainers, I know them personally. They're all well aware of what I've been preaching for 40 years, since I had the dubious honor of writing the first black affirmative action plan in the entire United States in 1970. I didn't write it for minorities. I wrote it for black folk. There's hardly a black in America that's in a prominent position that doesn't know what I'm talking about, how they have an obligation and responsibility to do something for black folk. No, I'm not going to go out and beg each one of them to come in. It's not my responsibility to go kiss every black person posterior, make him come and try to help his own people. If they don't want to do it, fine. You don't have to have every black. You get as many as you can and go about your business, do what you have to do. Now, Earl Graves and the rest of them, they know what I'm talking about. When people come to me and tell me the Urban League will have a meeting at the board, they will say, yeah, listen to Anderson, he got some good ideas, but don't stand too close because white folk won't like some of the things he's talking about, how they advantage black folk. I don't really care. I'm at an age now, I don't have to do any of these things. I do it because I love black folk. I don't have to do a damn thing but go eat and go to sleep and stay in my house. But it's not my responsibility to go out and beg black folk to save themselves. If they don't want to do it, fine, because the wagon is coming to get them. And people that know what I'm talking about, it's their responsibility. Like somebody called me and said, Dr. Anderson, you need money for your program. And do you know that there's a guy in Mississippi? and he has a lot of money, and he does this, he does. Hey, why don't you call him? I thought, why don't you call him? You know him, you call him. Or like Jane called me up in Philadelphia. She asked me, said, Dr. Anderson, what you need help for, Bill Cosby can help you just like that. Why don't you call Bill? I said, why don't you call him? You his aunt. She said, well, I can't get through to him because he got so many people around. I said, why in the world you think I can get through to him if you can't get through him? You his aunt. Quit calling and asking me to take care of everything for black people. I'm one black man out of 42 million. No, I'm not going to do any damn more when I'm doing. If they don't want to do it, fine.
Why don't you tell me, without mentioning the name of this very famous singer, international singer, who wanted to give money, who wanted to support and you guys talked about it for a while, worked out the deal, and in the end he backed out without mentioning.
He went and told, well, I could help you, but I got a white, he's married to a white woman, and her brother controls his money. He said he had to go talk to her, then he had to go pray on it. And he said, let me pray on it, and I come back and talk to them. Came back and said, well, I prayed, and God told me that I shouldn't be identified with anything that's too black. And so consequently, I'm sorry, I can't do anything to help my people. And I said, no, I'm not going for that. I've done this since 1970 when I wrote the first affirmative action plan in 1970. This is 2013. That's 43 years. I'm not doing it damn more. If they don't want to do it, fine.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
And thank you for staying with us, folks. Of course, you can always reach us on Facebook and Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. Our guest is the man with a plan. That's what I like to call him, Dr. Claud Anderson. He's the only one who's got a plan to save us, folks, and you got to listen closely. You'll pick up his books to understand what he's saying. Just a reminder, tomorrow, Dick Gregory's going to be here at the 50th anniversary of the assassination of JFK. Greg says he's going to drop some new knowledge, some stuff that he hasn't mentioned anywhere else. So if you know somebody who was interested in what happened when JFK got assassinated 50 years ago, make sure you tune in tomorrow right here on WOL. Dr. Anderson, I'm going to let you finish before we take another call.
Okay, good call. I'm not sure where I cut off, but I do thank and appreciate the gentleman for calling and telling me, and his past support for everything I'm talking about, and I also appreciate his concern about the fact that we can't get all blacks. But I tried to make a point before. I don't know where point we cut off. There's not my obligation. I'm not going any further. I got 42 million black folk in America. I'm one man. I've held almost every office and spoken out for black folk from the lowest office and to all the way up to state office for governors, over education with presidents and governors and everybody else. Ran campaigns for a couple of governors and for the president of the United States. I created a Harvest Institute, a black think tank for him. I put out 4 best-selling #1 books that sold, became #1 in America and around the world for black folk. I give speeches all over the country. I'm on television, radio. I can't do it anymore for black folk, and I'm not going to even pretend I will. If black folk don't want to join in, don't want to listen, let God help them. That's up to them. At my age, I don't really care anymore for those who don't care. If they don't care about themselves, I won't care either. And I do appreciate what he's saying, and I tell black folk right now, the wagon is coming. We're in a terrible condition. And keep sitting there somehow trying to find minuscule reasons for doing nothing to help save yourself. And I said, that's up to you. But you can do things. You don't have to have every black. Just get as many as you can and go do what you can do for your people and for yourself and for your community and your race.
All right, and that's probably what we'll have to do. Just wait till we get a critical mass and keep moving. 800-450-7876. Let's go to Shayon in Long Beach, California. Shayon, you have a question for Dr. Anderson.
Yeah, yes, I had a couple quick comments and then a question. My comments is, Dr. Claud Anderson is right. He shouldn't have to do all of that. And I know our black scholars get sick of black people. I know Minister Farrakhan has talked about that same thing. I watched Brother Steve Coakley, pass away and give his life trying to educate black people on what's going on. Dr. Claud Anderson's book, Powernomics, I specifically gave it to one of a Long Beach black councilman in the district that I grew up in. Gave him the autographed copy of Dr. Claud Anderson's book. Brother I don't even think he opened the book, let alone let's try to implement anything that was in the book. So I understand what he's talking about. And another thing, the black unemployment rate for black people been the highest among all races for a period of 40 years. 40 years. And that's not by accident. And as far as the black political party, I'm a registered independent. I agree with Dr. Claud Anderson. And all Jews, they don't necessarily agree with Zionism, but they go along with it because they understand the benefit of it. And I believe that if we did form an independent party, like Dr. Anderson said, that eventually we'll see the benefit of it, and we don't have to agree with it, but we'll see the benefit and go along with it. And my question is, how can we get it started? Now, see, the next election will be they're going to want us to go out and vote for Hillary and elect Hillary. So I think black people should, maybe start right there and say, okay, this next election cycle in 2016, hey, we form our own independent bloc. Be like, if y'all want us to support Hillary, what is she specifically going to do for us? And I'd like to know what the brother think about that and how we can get it done. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Shayon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, he's gone.
Okay, good. Tell them that's an excellent idea. That we've tossed that around. You got enough got enough key blacks in all these different states that are already prepped and ready for this. If you all do is come together. You can either come together on a teleconference and do it, or you can somebody needs to take the initiative and set up a conference someplace in mid-United States and meet and begin to develop plans for it. Now, there's one group that's leading a lot of this. Let's take Bob Law out of New York. He used to be what's called a night talk show host. Now they've got the elements of one started. Bob Law in New York would be an excellent one. And I don't know if I have his number with me, but you can call me back, or I call and give it to you. And he's in New York City. Bob Law. He's got a group started to create an independent party. We got people like Dorothy Tillman in Chicago, city council person. We had Joanne Watson in Detroit, Michigan, a city council person. We got Rosie Milligan in Los Angeles, who's ready to do it. We got my brother on the city council down in Dallas, Texas, and Arlington, which you were talking about earlier with the Toby Awards. He's ready to do it. We got blacks in Kansas City. We got blacks all over the United States now, but we got to figure out how to form them and get them together and vote and tell everybody, vote as a block. Don't vote as a finger, vote as a fist, and say, we will give you and vote for you and support you, but you deliver to black folk. We're not concerned about what you deliver to gays and midgets and humpbacks and cripples, but what you do for black folk. That's our first priority. Don't mistreat those groups, but make sure they are secondary to your first priority to take care of those people that put you in office. Always when you go to office, you tell your politicians, dance first with the person that brought you to the party before you dance with anybody else.
All right, good question, Shayon. In your book, Dr. Anderson, you say one of the political actions, step number 11, is to initiate a national leadership renaissance for empowerment-oriented black leadership. What do you mean by that?
That's what we're talking about right now. That's what we're talking about. Where you find new black leadership in the country. There are new young black folk. These young black folk right now are getting concerned and sensitive to the fact that nothing's going to happen for them. They have a very diminished future right now. Somebody needs to organize these people. We need an organization. Need to have a national meeting someplace in the United States within the next year where all the interested blacks who are concerned about saving themselves and their family can come together and form a very strategically powerful group that will control politics and also begin to effectuate anything else from the schools, and then build an economic group, a power base underneath that, so they can control politics in general and impact the society. It can be done, but somebody has to initiate it. I can't do it very much. I'm getting too old to do it. It can be done, and I got a broad list of people, and as I said, that are willing and ready and able to do it. But we have to have some money to be able to do that. The Harvest Institute was designed to do it. But right now, most of the major people that promised to give money to the Harvest Institute never gave a penny. And all these black athletes and black entertainers, we are tax-exempt, non-profit corporation. We need funds to be able to pull all these people together and have a national conference. And at that time, we also declare a black holiday every year. And in the summer, in August, called the Harvest Institute, where our blacks come together and celebrate their special holidays, like other groups have a special holiday. We can do all those things, Carl, but we have to have money to do it. We have to have institutional people to do it. And right now, we got a broad, growing list of young people who says we're ready because we don't have any leadership. That's why all these youth crimes are going up, because young people are disoriented. They don't know what's going on. And they don't have any black leadership to lead them.
Well, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who's got a couple of dollars, in the next few days, and they need that tax write-off for the end of the year. Hit them up and tell them about the Harvest Institute. Before the end of the show, Dr. Anderson's going to give you the address or the phone number where you can contact it. Your political action step 12, adopt a public code of conduct for group accountability. What do you mean, quickly, what do you mean about that?
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier, where black folk understand all these things we've talked about. Learn how to pool your resources, pool everything, pool your vote, pool your money, and pool your bodies into a community, build a community. And inside that community, build an alternative economy where black folk can produce jobs, services, goods, and products, and a self-respect and appreciation for their own people, and vote as a bloc to demand respect in the country and compete with everybody, compete with people in this country, economically, politically. It can be done. The same thing I just got through saying. And I don't have time to fully explain all of it right now because I know your time is running out, Carl. But let me tell you how to get through to it. If you want to get some copies of the book, anything like that, go to www.powernomics.com and get the books. And also, there's a link on there to the Harvest Institute. And the Harvest Institute needs donations. Right now, we're in the federal claims court trying to force the government to enforce the 1866 Indian Treaty, which means billions and billions of dollars for black freemen and black Indians, the descendants of those people in this country, who will unite with black folk and pool all our resources to help us get some things. Then, you can call the Harvest, you can call the corporation's number and get this information. You can call and order the books and things, the materials. That's www.powernomics.com, but they can also call the telephone number 301-564-6075. Again, 301-564-6075, and we get the Power Pack books to you. You get all 4 books, give you all this information, and we need to start organizing. There are DVDs. You can call these people together in your basement, give them iced tea and lemonade, and begin to organize in this country. Time is running out. And that's why on page 174 in Black Labor White Wealth, I said in 2013, which is this year, black folk will become a permanent underclass of beggars and criminals. And the beggars and criminals mean the people who have to live like that for the rest of their lives once this year expires. We have no one to lead us. We have no place to go. We've got to organize fast.
Doc, give us that number again real slow.
For the corporation, they call the corporation number as 301-564-6075. Again, 301-564-6075, and get these materials. Let's all get together and start organizing. Otherwise, you haven't got a snowball's chance in hell. And I hate to scare you like that, but that's the truth from the bottom of my heart.
Because I remember you saying this quite some time ago. It must have been about 10, 15 years ago. And it seemed, 2013 is right here. Said if we didn't get our act together, we'd be a permanent honor class. And looking around, it's almost prophetic.
That's right. Well, I told him about a year. I predicted back in 1970 that by the year 2000, the Hispanics would surpass you too, and you become a third-class citizen. And you're now predestined to become a fourth-class citizen. And you're vulnerable now because you can't feed yourself. You're totally dependent on the society. You don't have any businesses, any wealth, any power. Right now, 70% of all the black people in America live in and around 10 large cities, and they got less than a 2-week food supply. If something happens and they lose electricity, or a major storm comes and food can't get into the grocery stores, you can starve 70% of the black folk to death in 2 weeks in this country. We're totally dependent on other people to take care of us.
And we got to stop right now because we're out of time. But thank you very much for joining us. And we're going to keep pushing the books, and hopefully we'll get it together for you.
Well, thank you, buddy. And tell all my people that I thank them for listening. And again, for those who don't appreciate what I'm saying, tell them pretend they never heard from me in life.